Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. Today, we have two special guests, my buddy Ton and his cousin Con. Ton and Con, they're cousins, not kissing cousins. They're just regular old cousins. And what we're gonna do today is we're gonna replace the hydraulic brake booster, this big mamma jamma, on Con's 1998 100 series Land Cruiser. And the reason why we are going to be replacing this hydraulic brake booster, also known as a brake master cylinder, is because Con was having some issues with his braking, and he's done some preliminary things to rule out other problems, and nothing has really fixed the problem with his brakes. And now we're at the point where hopefully replacing the hydraulic brake booster is going to be the fix to get his brakes working like they should be working. I'm going to get Con up here, and he's going to describe the symptoms that he's been experiencing and the things he's tried up to this point to remedy his braking problems.
So I bought this truck a few years ago, and it's always had braking issues. They never felt strong, and I had a pedal that had excessive travel. So the first thing I did was put new brake pads, although they weren't great brake pads. They were AutoZone semi-metallic pads. I think this truck's a little too heavy for those pads. And the next thing I did was I put stainless steel brake lines. And those stainless steel brake lines in my past, I've done on different vehicles, they typically increase brake pedal feel quite a bit, but this truck was no change. So I've had this truck 3 years now. Last year I changed to hot severe duties in the front, and I can't remember what the step down for the rears because I couldn't get the severe duties in this model. The brakes are stronger, but I still have the excessive brake pedal travel. And I did have a pretty bad brake fade coming down Highway 108 one time. I bled this truck myself in my garage. No change, no benefit. So then the next thing I did was I took it to an independent mechanic shop, and I had it bled there. So I've had it bled every year before a big trip, and the brake pedals travel has not changed or has not gotten any better. And I think it's starting to get a little bit worse. So this is kind of like where I'm at now. So I just want to have a truck that works well and not have to have any concerns over the brakes. So we're doing this. That's the last and final step.
All right, as you heard Con explain, he's tried some things leading up to this very expensive hydraulic brake booster replacement. He replaced pads, he had the system professionally bled, and no change. Usually when you have a brake pedal that's feeling soft and it's traveling further, that's usually a clear indication that there's air in the lines. And Con did his due diligence with trying to eliminate the possibility that it's just air in the system by bleeding it himself, and then secondly, taking it to a shop to professionally bleed it, and still no change in the way the pedal is feeling. So he's pretty much eliminated the other possibilities, and we're now going to try this replacement, and hopefully after we're all done with installing this new hydraulic brake booster and bleeding the system the way the Toyota factory service manual explains to do, and we'll be showing that process in this video using the Techstream program. Hopefully Con is going to find out that his braking is improved by a lot, and the repair will be a rousing success. Fingers crossed. So without further ado, we're going to get out to the truck and we're going to get started with this job. For this job, we're going to be using information from the Toyota factory service manual. I don't actually have a physical book for the 98 Toyota Land Cruiser 100 series. When I don't have a book for what I need help with, I go to a website called Toyota Tech Info, and if I pay $20 for a 2-day subscription, then I could access all the information I need during that 48 hours I have the subscription. I could download as much as I want in a PDF format and save it to my computer. The caveat with being able to access that Toyota Tech Info website is you need a Windows-based computer. So in the video description, I'll put a link to the Toyota Tech Info website, and at the very bottom of the page, you'll see a link to where it says system requirements. If you have a desktop or a laptop that's Windows-based and it meets the minimum system requirements from the Tech Info website, then you could access the same information I'm accessing to do this job. So I wanted to relay that to you, that You don't necessarily have to buy all the books, and also at some point Toyota and Lexus stopped making the physical books. You can't get them even if you wanted to get them. All the information is online, so you have to access it through that website. So I wanted to share that with you so you can do the same thing and access the information you need for your repairs on whatever Toyota, Lexus vehicle you're working on. So the first step they say is you want to depressurize the hydraulic brake booster system, and you do that by pumping the brake pedal 40 times with the key off. You don't want the key on for any of this until we get to the brake bleeding procedure when we're done installing the new hydraulic brake booster. So I'm gonna get Con inside the rig, and he's gonna depress the brake pedal 40 times. You can see as Con is depressing the brake pedal, we're seeing some movement in the fluid reservoir. What we noticed at about the 30 pedal compression spot, we noticed that we didn't see any bubbles coming up into the fluid reservoir, and we noticed that the fluid level rose. That kind of is a good visual indicator that you've depressurized it and the fluid has risen a little bit, letting you know that the system is depressurized.
During the process of pumping the pedal goes down and you hit like a little step, and then it gets around the 30 or 35 depressions, the pedal goes to the floor. I just completed the process all the way to 40, kept going. But I did notice at the 30 or 35 part, it went further.
The next step is we want to draw fluid out of the reservoir. I'm going to do that with this Medivac fluid extractor. It's a nice fluid extractor because it holds quite a bit of fluid. You can do it with a smaller like medical syringe, but you're going to be there forever. So this is a nice tool to have. I use it for drawing out brake fluid. I also use it to draw out fluid out of the power steering reservoir if I'm going to be doing work on a power steering pump, or maybe I'm just doing the low-tech method of drawing a little fluid out and then putting some new fluid in. So this Medivac fluid extractor is a really nice tool to own. I'm going to take the cap off. You'll notice I have a fender cover on here because if I mess up and I spill some brake fluid on the paint, it could strip the paint off. Brake fluid is a very good paint remover, so I'm doing my due diligence by protecting this fender here in case I spill. So just know that if you spill it on your paint, clean it off really fast, and maybe you didn't do any damage to your paint.
There's a screen in there.
Oh, is there a screen in there? Yeah, there's some type of obstruction there. And then just drain it into whatever catch container you have. What we noticed when trying to get the tube inside here to draw a lot of fluid out, there's a step in there that's keeping you from really getting it deep in there. Con noticed by looking at the new one, if you direct the tube towards the front, you can find a channel to get the tube deeper into the bottom of the reservoir. So I'll show you how I insert it. So I was able to find that sweet spot and slide it in deeper. That's working really good. The next things we're going to do are going to take place inside the cab. We want to get access to the connection of the brake pedal to the rod of the hydraulic brake booster, and you have to get access from underneath the dashboard. So we're going to remove this panel right here that they call it the #1 safety pad. We're going to remove this little corner kick plate panel that's called the #1 undercover, and then there's a finish panel behind this one that we're going to remove. We're first going to start off by removing this one in the bottom left corner. To get this panel out, we're first going to remove this footrest. It just slides over a metal post. You could just pull up and remove it, and you'll see the little studs there that these things slide over. To get this panel out, we have to slide it backwards towards the driver's seat. This trim piece is going to stop that panel going backwards because it overlaps. So I'm just going to get in here with the trim removal tool, get underneath the lip and pull up, and it should pop out. So you just slide it underneath and you should be just able to pull up and start breaking it free. It's held on with clips. There we go. There's a plastic nut that affixes this side panel to the floorboard, you just turn it lefty-loosey and can get it off. Or maybe it's just a pull plug. It's not an unscrew plug, it's just a friction plug that slides over post. And then you should be able to get your hand between the carpet and the cover and pull backwards and just pull it out, just like that. We're now going to work on getting this panel free. From experience, you can drop this panel and get it down to the floorboard, but then these cable hatches for your gas hatch release and your hood release are going to keep you from being able to pull the panel all the way out. And we want this panel all the way free of the vehicle so we can get underneath the dash to do the work we need to do. So these hatch releases are held on with a couple screws, whether you want to call them Phillips or more appropriately Japanese industrial standard screws. So I'm going to use my JIS screwdriver and remove the two screws. If you lift up the handle, you can see the two screws that I'm going to be removing. Once you have the two screws removed, you could push the release mechanism forward towards the floorboard and then get it out of there. There we go. We're going to do the same thing with the hood release. Now that we have both latch releases unhooked from the panel, we're going to disconnect this one screw. You can get it off with a JIS or Phillips screwdriver, or it looks like it might be like an 8mm, but I'm just going to use my JIS screwdriver and unscrew this bottom left corner screw. So now let's go up top and I'll show you what you have to do next. To get this panel off, this black trim piece right underneath the instrument panel needs to come free because it overlaps. So you just pull this out with your hands. It just snaps in. There's obviously going to be an electrical connector here for this dimmer switch for the instrument panel lights. So you don't want to pull back with too much force, and you want to be able to disconnect that. There we go. If you turn it in this orientation, the release button is facing upward. So you just have to reach around, do a little reach around action, and push the button and pull it out. Depending on your rig, either how you did it or you maybe bought it as is, you might have some accessory switches in here. So Con has a couple accessory switches. This was a switch for some lights in the front, and this is for an ARB compressor. This one's not connected, so we could just pull this one out. This one right here you could pull out, and we're just going to disconnect this connector here. We just have to remember that it goes to the furthest left post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here and I'm going to pull back on this panel, but again, being careful not to pull back with too much force because there's electrical connectors for all these switches. So I'm just going to carefully pull back, and then to gain access to these switches, I could pull back on the top right now a little bit, get a little bit more room to work, and then I'm going to start working on getting these connectors disconnected. So I'll work on these two top ones first.
One is for the right side, one is for the left side.
It's for the side windows, right?
Yeah, the side windows.
They're both the same size plug, it looks like, huh?
Yeah.
What I just noticed is that these two plugs are the same size and you could potentially mix them up. So I'm gonna grab a paint pen and label these so I can't mistakenly reverse them. Put a little mark on this one and then put another mark on the female side it connects to. As long as you label one, then you're gonna not be able to mix them up. This one's being a little stubborn here. There we go. A nice tool that I found that helps disconnect electrical connectors is these spudger tools that they use for working on electronic devices. Sean was the guy who actually turned me on to these, so I was able to push down the release mechanism, then push backwards. This is nice because it's made out of plastic. Some guys use screwdrivers for the same thing, but when you use metal, there's a higher chance that you're gonna crack something and break your connector. So I suggest using a plastic implement to assist you with getting connectors disconnected. So those two are now disconnected. We've got another one down here for the differential lock. How does this one disconnect? There we go. Okay, for the mirror control, the push button is facing towards the driver's side. Can't get it. I'm gonna get these plugs out of the way. If you push on these plugs, the little side tabs, you can push them and pull them out and get them out of your way. So the right one goes on the right side and the left one goes on the left side. Now I have better access to see what the hell I'm doing here. Finally got this one, and then the final one, I think it's for lights. I don't know what it is. It's a little white one, and you could disconnect that one. So now all of them are disconnected. Let me go over to the right side, make sure there's nothing to disconnect on that side. There's another connector here. You could pop it out with a little clip on the side here. There we go. Instead of trying to disconnect the black electrical connector, you can release tabs on these sides and you can get this free. That was the last thing we needed to disconnect to get the panel free. The next thing I'm going to remove is this finish panel. It's held on by 4 12mm bolts. I'm going to use my Milwaukee ratchet to zip them out. The next thing we're going to remove is this number 2 heating duct. He's got some accessory wiring going on here where someone put a couple zip ties. So we're going to cut these zip ties to free the wires. Untape this. This doesn't look like a sick mod to me.
Duct tip and zip ties.
That's probably for the microphone for the radio.
Oh, okay. We have to undo this screw right here. We can do it with a, looks like an 8mm or with a JIS screwdriver. I'm gonna do the JIS screwdriver. We can pull this down out of the socket and then pull it out of the right side. Wire's getting tight. There we go. There we go. Okay. The number 2 heating duct is out of the way. The next thing we're going to remove is this ABS ECU because it does get in the way of you having better access to the 4 nuts you have to remove to free the hydraulic brake booster. So we're going to get this out next. The first thing I'm going to do to remove the ABS ECU is I'm going to disconnect 3 plugs that plug into it, and all the release tabs are facing towards the driver's side. So I'm going to squeeze the tab and pull back and get these free. Okay, there's 1, 2, harder to get this other one, and 3. There's a 10mm nut on the bottom and a 10mm nut a little bit higher right up against the firewall that affixes the ABS ECU. So I'm using what looks like to be about a 12-inch extension, a swivel, and a deep 10mm socket, and my Milwaukee gun. And here's the ABS ECU. The next thing we're going to remove is the clevis pin that secures the rod that attaches the plunger of the hydraulic brake booster to the brake pedal. You can see it faces the driver's side. I'm going to get in there with the straight nose, needle nose pliers and pull it out. And then once that pin is pulled out, I can push the steel rod from the left to the right and remove it and free the brake pedal of the plunger of the hydraulic brake booster. I'm not going to try to get the camera in here to show it because it's too tight to get the camera in here. At the same time, I'm getting my hand and needle nose pliers in there. So this is what the pin and the little rod looks like. So when you get underneath there, you remove the pin, you free it of the rod, and then you push on the driver's side of the rod and you push it towards the passenger side, and you can free this rod from the brake pedal and from the plunger of the hydraulic brake booster. The next thing we're going to remove is the charcoal canister, also known as the evap canister. When you look at this hydraulic brake booster, in order for it to come out towards the front, this sucker is going to get in the way. So we have to disconnect some electrical connectors and we have to disconnect a few hoses. Let's start with the electrical connectors. There's 2 on the top here. There we go. Stubborn, it's got dirt in it. And then this one right here, we're going to disconnect, this blue one. I'm also going to get in here with needle nose pliers and compress this plastic clip and free this wiring loom. Okay, that's free. Now let's work on the hoses. These clamps are little girly clamps, and if you're not a girly man, you should be able to squeeze them with your hand and move them backwards. So there's 1 and 2. Give a little twist and ease them off. Hopefully the rubber hoses aren't going to be too brittle and cracked. I could see a little bit of cracking on the end of this one, but I don't think it was anything that I did. It's cracking from age. Give a little twist and twist this one off. This last one isn't a girly man clamp. It's actually one you should compress with some bent nose, needle nose pliers, which I will. Slide that back. And let's see if I can just twist this one. It's not going to cooperate. So now I'm going to get in here with a little pick tool and assist it. Get in between the hose and the plastic fitting on the canister and work it in there. Work it, work it. I think that might be loose enough. I can't really get underneath the bottom. Yep, there we go. There's a final tube that connects up to the front bottom side here, and that's a drain. And let me see if I could just get my hand in there and pull that sucker off. There is potential you can mess this up. Con actually did something smart. He took a picture. There's no way we can mess up the one on the bottom front. The two on the top next to each other, they are similar size fittings, so you potentially couldn't mix them up, but you can tell by looking at this one, you could see that that's a bigger opening, so you can easily tell that this one goes to the front one and then this one goes to the back one. But play it safe, mark them or take a picture just so you don't mess them up. So now we have all the hoses, we got the electrical connectors disconnected. We have to disconnect two 12 millimeter bolts that hold the evap canister or charcoal canister to the body, and we should be able to pull this sucker up. To get these two 12 millimeter bolts out, I'm going to use my flex head 12 millimeter ratcheting box end wrench from Gear Wrench. They're nice. Okay, let's see if this sucker just pulls right up. I just noticed that this wiring harness attaches to the canister here. I have to get my needle nose pliers and compress that and get that out too. There we go. I think that might be the final thing. Something's holding it up. We were mistaken that we needed to remove these two 12 millimeter bolts to remove the evap canister. There's another bolt that goes underneath that attaches the bracket to the body, and you can't access it. So then we spied that there's another 12 millimeter bolt right here that attaches the evap canister to the bracket. So we're going to release this and then see if we can pull the charcoal canister out. There we go. That was the ticket. So you can see down here, this is what was fighting us, removing the bracket with the charcoal canister. We couldn't access that 12 millimeter bolt. We decided to show this mistake just so you don't make the same mistake. So all you have to do is remove the front 12 millimeter bolt, and then you could remove the charcoal canister from the bracket. Next, we're going to disconnect 4 switches from the hydraulic brake booster. This front one here is the low level warning connector. We're going to press the button and pull back. What the 3 of these do, I have no clue. I'm just going to disconnect them. Okay, all 4 connectors are disconnected, and you can't screw these up because they're all different sizes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to break free 3 brake line connections to the hydraulic brake booster. There's 2 in the front and there's 1 on the side facing the engine. What I'm going to have ready to go is some plugs and some vacuum caps. I'm going to want to put a vacuum cap over the flanged end of the metal brake line to stop any fluid from dripping out, to make less of a mess. And then I'm going to pick one of these silicone plugs, either these smaller red ones or these medium-sized blue ones, and put those into the female ports on the brake booster so no fluid can drip out while we're working on getting the hydraulic brake booster disconnected from the vehicle. No matter how careful you are, you're going to drip some, so get some type of rag underneath here. You're going to want to use a flare nut wrench, 10 millimeter. I'm actually using a flex head one from Gear Wrench, which is nice. It lets you be able to get in there in tighter locations with the additional articulation with the flex head. That is kind of loose, huh? What Con just told me is that he found that those brake line connections are just a little bit undersized. They're not a true 10 millimeter, and he actually has his own wrench that fits a little bit tighter than mine does. You'll see the difference here, how much you can turn it. Yeah, there's more slop there, so I'm going to use his. Once you break it free with a flare nut wrench, then it's okay to use an open end wrench, because an open end wrench you can reset quicker. You just don't want to break them free with an open end wrench, because if the line connection is really tight, you have a good chance of stripping it. With a flare nut wrench, you have connection on 4 sides of the flare nut, which makes it really hard to strip it out. Always use a flare nut wrench with flare nut fittings. I loosened this one, but it's still going to be needing some persuasion with the wrench. So now I'm going to transition to an open end 10 millimeter to expedite the removal. So I got my open end 10 millimeter and I'm just working it off. Sometimes you could push on the hose and get it to where you can turn it with your hand, which I can right now. I'm going to get ready with a 7/32 vacuum cap to slip over the flared tubing, and then I'm going to get a plug inside the hydraulic brake booster. So you have to pull this sucker out and slip it over. There's nothing coming out, but I'm going to fit in a plug in there anyways, because maybe when we're moving it, oh, I see a little bit flowing out now. So it looks like this blue silicone plug is a good fit. And I'm going to do the same with the other 2 lines. I'm going to break it free first with the flare nut. Okay, that's broken free. And then I'll transition to the open end. I've got the second line out and capped off. I'm working on the third line, the one facing towards the engine. Got it loose with the flare nut and then transition to the open end. And you get the idea. We're not going to bore you with this repetitive. I'm going to do the same thing, get it loose and then cap it off. All right, we have all 3 brake lines disconnected, capped off. And then the final step now is we have to go back underneath the dash and remove 4 12 millimeter nuts that holds the hydraulic brake booster onto the body. So let's go back into the cab. You can see the 2 nuts on the driver's side of the brake pedal bracket that we have to remove. And then the 2 on the passenger side are a little bit harder to see because you've got the steering shaft in your way. You can see this access to get the ones on the passenger side of the brake pedal mechanism. I'm going to go in through this gap between the steering shaft and this brake pedal bracket. I'm going to use a long 3/8 extension and a swivel on at least one of them, and I'm going to marry that up to my small DeWalt impact gun to zip those out. So here's what I have in the way of extensions. These are impact extensions, 3/8. I have a 5-inch one married up to about a 12-inch one, and these are wobble extensions. So you can see that I get a little bit of articulation because of the wobble feature, and I have a 12 millimeter deep impact socket. I'm going to go for the bottom left one first with this setup. When I go for the top left one, I'm going to connect up a swivel, because with the angle that is necessary to get up onto that upper left nut, I'm going to have to use the wobble with it. And then I'm going to use my small DeWalt 3/8 gun to zip them out. So I'm going to go in with the socket and extensions, and I'm going to get it onto that bottom one. Okay, I'm on there. I'm going to connect up my gun. Okay, we've got the bottom left one free. I'm going to add on the swivel and then go for the top left one. I've got it loose, so I'm going to have to get my hand in there and get it out the rest of the way. Okay, that's 2. Now we're going to go for the ones on the passenger side. So I'm going to go right in between the brake pedal bracket and the steering shaft and get on that bottom right one. Okay, looks like I'm on there good. The last one, top right. Okay, I'm on there. And to get my hand onto those nuts on the passenger side, I'm reaching around the right side of the steering shaft and then getting in there with my hand to remove them. So now all 4 of the nuts are off the studs. We should be able to pull that hydraulic brake booster out now. We have to release this brake line from this plastic clip on the assembly. Should be able just to pop it forward and out. Okay, that's loose. Maybe pull on these brake lines a little bit off to the sides here so we can come straight out with it. Don't want to torque on them too hard, but just enough to get them out of the path. And then I should be able to slide this out of the firewall. The studs are kind of long, so you have to travel back a decent amount of ways. This line on the side facing the engine was kind of hooking it and not letting us pull forward. So let's see if we can now get it out the rest of the way. There we go. It's almost out. Brake line still fighting us. Oh, there we go. What is hooking me here? These brake lines want to hook you and stop you from pulling it out. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass, but you need like a third set of hands here. Grab this one right here. This one's hooking me right here. Pull back towards you. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So you can see I was fighting it quite a bit. Number one, this thing's not exactly light. And then as you're trying to free it, those freaking lines are hooking you, making it harder for you to pull it out of the body, but we finally got this sucker out. In between the Firewall and the hydraulic brake booster is a gasket. It's a metal gasket, and you're gonna wanna put a new one of these on. You could technically reuse this, it's metal, but if you're gonna go through all this labor to replace this expensive hydraulic brake booster, you may as well put a new gasket in, and we'll put the part number for that gasket in the video description. And Khan noticed that when he removed the old gasket from the old hydraulic brake booster, he noticed that there's a little lip, and that lip faces the Firewall. So when you put your new gasket on, just make sure the little protrusion is facing towards the Firewall. You can feel it with your finger. There we go. We are now ready to get this new hydraulic brake booster in Khan's 98 100 series Land Cruiser. So you'll see that in order to facilitate an easier insertion of the new brake master cylinder or hydraulic brake booster, I took some small bungees and I pulled them to the sides. I've got this one on the driver's side pulled to the bracket that holds the evap canister or charcoal canister. I've got this upper one just slung around the fill port for the engine oil, and then I have this one closest to the Firewall wrapped around a wiring loom for the engine. And so hopefully that's going to help facilitate me getting this in there without a lot of obstruction. So here we go. So I'm going to dive this thing in at this angle like a submarine going underneath the surface. Dive, dive, dive. Okay, so we're going to dive this thing in here and line up the rod going into the hole, and then look for the studs to align. That brake line's still in my way a little bit, unfortunately. There we go. Okay, it's sort of in there. So now we're gonna go back inside the rig and we're gonna get those 4 12mm nuts started. These studs are long enough to where you really don't have to have a helper holding it in there. They're pretty long, so even though there's a little bit of tilt to it, you should be able to get in there with your hands and get all 4 nuts started. We're not gonna bother showing getting those nuts started because you saw how they came out. Just get your hand in there and start them by hand first. I wouldn't suggest starting them with the gun because you might cross thread them. So get them all started by hand and then get in there and tighten them up. The torque spec for those nuts is 9 foot-pounds, but because of the angle, you're not going to be able to get an accurate spec. When you're trying to torque something to spec, you need to get onto the fastener at a perfect right angle for you to get an accurate measurement with your torque wrench. So I'm just going to use that German spec we all know and love, good and tight, and call it good. The next thing I did is I got underneath there and got the little rod with the clevis pin capturing the brake pedal. I chose not to show it because it's impossible to show it to get the camera and myself in there at the same time. So just remember, you want the metal rod to slide in from the passenger side towards the driver's side, and once the brake pedal and the plunger of the master cylinder are being captured by that rod, then you get in there with the little clevis pin and slide it into the hole and lock it in place so it can't fall out. Now what we're gonna do is work on getting all 3 brake lines reconnected to the new hydraulic brake booster. I'm gonna go for this one on the side here first. The new hydraulic brake booster is gonna have these plastic plugs that you can remove, and then I'm gonna get my vacuum cap off. I found with these vacuum caps, they can fit on pretty tight, so a lot of times I give it a little assist with a small flat blade screwdriver. Inspect the end of the flare tubing. Sometimes you'll see a little sliver of metal, and that can maybe affect you getting a leak-free connection. So just analyze it a little bit, make sure there's no piece of a sliver of a metal there, and then now we're going to get it connected. Because we tweaked on these lines a little bit, they might not be ready for like an easy insertion. So I already see that I have to tweak it a little bit back towards the firewall, see if I could get it lined up better. Okay, I got it started several turns. I'm pretty sure that it's going in straight. You don't want to cross thread these because then that would ruin your day. So I'm just wiggling it, and I could tell that I'm good. It's gone several turns, so now I'm going to transition to my open end 10mm and cinch it up. Okay, that bottomed out, and now I'm going to transition to the flare nut wrench to cinch it up tight because I don't want to strip it. How tight do you get these? Well, it does have a spec, but I'm just going to get them to that German spec of good and tight. That should be good enough. Now I'm going to work on the next two. Remove the plastic plug, get my vacuum cap off. I see this one has a little bit of a sliver. You see that little thing right there? That's a little sliver of metal. And I'm going to take that off with my hands. I'm going to inspect it to see if there's any other debris on there. You just want to make sure that you have a nice clean end that's going into the hydraulic brake booster. This one's going to go into a clip right here. I think it goes into that bottom one right there, huh? I think it was that one, right, guys?
Yeah.
I'm going to snap that in there and then get this one started. This one threaded in really nice. I didn't even have to use the open end wrench. Okay, I'm going to tighten that one up. That should be good. Go for the last one. I struggled with this last one and I tapped out and let Ton do it. The line just got a little bit tweaked and it wasn't aligning right. And I gave it the old college try, tapped out, and Ton got it no problem. So we have all three lines attached to the new hydraulic brake booster, and then now what we're going to do is reconnect all the electrical connectors. So I'll connect these three on the side first. Push in, hear the snap, pull back, make sure you got a good connection. Okay. And then the final one, the level indicator. All right, now we're going to get our evap canister or charcoal canister back installed. They have these fins on here, and those interlock with the bracket that attaches to the body. So you just slide that sucker in there. I don't have the bottom one connected yet. There we go. And once you have it in properly, you'll be able to feel you got it in right because it's solid. It doesn't really move around a lot. I'm going to connect up this hose right here. I'm going to get my bent nose needle nose pliers. Connect this sucker up. That's back in place. We have this one, and then we have this one. And remember, the one that's spread out a little bit wider, that one goes on the front one. And then the other one goes here. And then you have these girly man clamps you could compress, get them back in place. We have the drain on the bottom, on the front here, we have to slide back on. That's back connected. We have our two electrical connectors we're going to get reconnected. Okay, those are connected. And then now we just have to get that one bolt to attach the charcoal canister to the bracket. The instructions in the manual say to just reverse your procedure. I got the ABS ECU back connected with the two 10mm bolts, and I made the three electrical connections. The next thing we did is we slid in the number 2 heating duct. And remember how it came out. We disconnected it first from the driver's side, and then we slid it out from the passenger side. So we went in the reverse direction. We slid it in to the passenger side connection first, and you might find it's going to fight you a little bit. If it's not sliding in fairly smoothly, you might be catching one of the edges on the metal part that it slides over. So just pull it back out and make sure you're not tweaking the plastic. And then once you get it slid over that metal connection, then you could come back towards the driver's side and plug it into this connection. Because Con had some accessory wiring, I just re-zip tied that accessory wiring to the number 2 heating duct to clean it up. Now we're going to get that finish panel back in place with the 4 10mm bolts. For this finish panel, you'll want to get the bottom left one hooked in first. There's a tab that has to slide into a hole, and then you can rotate it up and get it in position. Make sure that this plug right here goes through that hole. And we're just going to snug these up by feel. We're not going to try to torque them to spec. Now we're going to get this panel reconnected. We're first going to plug in this connection right here. Okay, that's snapped back in. So let's get in the plugs on this side now. Now we have to push in the switches we removed. There we go. This is the left one, the left rear vent. That's plugged in. And then we'll plug in the right rear vent. So the one with the orange mark goes with the orange switch. And then remember this one had a wire that we pulled off for an accessory switch. So we've got this panel plugged back in. You just got to make sure all the clips line up and you push it in and secure it on all its corners. Now we're going to get this plastic bezel in place. We have to make that one electrical connection for the dimmer switch. I'm going to get this steering wheel back down and then make this connection and then just plug this in just like so. Remember to get the small screw in the bottom left hand corner connected for this cover. And now what we're going to do is get these hatch releases reconnected to the panel with the 2 screws each. So we'll have to feed that thing in there, rotate it in place. You see this hook right here? This has to hook on the back side, just like so, and then get your 2 screws in. You got to lift up the hatch. Okay, you get the idea. We're gonna do the same with the hood release. So once we got this panel back in, we put this side panel back in. It just slips in over the stud. You put that plastic plug over it, and then you slide the footrest over the 2 studs that it slides over, and then you just grab your trim piece and pop it back in place with the clips. Basically everything now is done with the install of the new hydraulic brake booster. Now what we have to do is fill up the brake booster with some .3 brake fluid, and then we have to go through the whole brake bleeding procedure. .3 brake fluid, use your brake fluid of choice. This is from AutoZone. Fill this sucker up. It's going to take quite a bit. I don't know what the fluid capacity is, but it's quite a bit. You get the idea. We're just going to fill this up to the max line. The first step that the bleeding procedure says is you want to pump the brake pedal over 40 times. And then what you do is you turn the key to the on position, and then you're listening that the brake booster will stop operating after 30 to 40 seconds. If that brake booster keeps running for more than 40 seconds, then we have to repeat the procedure of turning the key to the off position and pumping the brake pedal another 40 times. And then once we get to the point where after pumping the brake pedal, we turn the key on and the pump only actuates for about 30 to 40 seconds, then we're good to go to move on to the next step. All right, Con depressed the pedal about 40 times. Now he's going to turn the ignition key to the on position, and we're going to be listening to the hydraulic brake booster and see that it turns off between 30 to 40 seconds. If not, we're going to go through the procedure of pumping the pedal again and then turn the key back on, and eventually we'll get there. Okay, go ahead. Turn the key on. Has it been 40 seconds?
Yes. Almost 30.
It just stopped.
35.
35?
Yep.
So you saw we were timing it, and it looks like we've got it good on the first attempt. You could also see that the level went down quite a bit. We started off with the level at the max position, and now it's dropped down to somewhere between the minimum and maximum. So I'm gonna top that thing off to the max again. For this bleed procedure, we decided to remove the front wheels because getting access to the bleed nipple on the caliper was gonna be hard because of how far in the wheels fit over the caliper. It was hard for me to get in there with my offset wrench. We jacked up the vehicle, we supported it on 6-ton jack stands on both frame rails, and then now we're gonna start the bleed procedure. You start with the right front one, then you go to the left front, then the right rear, and then the left rear. And for this beginning procedure, we're not using the Techstream program. We're just bleeding it like you would normally bleed a normal brake system without using a computer. So Con's gonna be in the rig. The key is gonna be in the on position to power the brake booster. He's gonna pump the pedal 20 times, and then he's gonna hold firm with the pressure on the pedal. I'm gonna open up the bleeder. I'm gonna see some air and some fluid come out. And when I crack that bleeder, the pedal's gonna go to the floor. Con's gonna hold it there. I'm gonna close off the bleeder, and then I'm gonna tell him to start pumping again, and then he could start pumping up 20 times again. So that's the procedure. Pump the pedal, hold it. Open the bleeder, pedal sinks to the floor, he holds it there. I close off the bleeder, and then he can let up on the pedal. If he lets up on the pedal while I have the bleeder still open, that could suck air back into the system, which you don't want. So the person in the vehicle has to pay attention to the instructions that the person at the bleeder is giving them. Con, start pumping. When you get to 20 pumps, say holding. That lets me know that I could crack it. We noticed while Con was pumping the pedal, that allows the fluid to rise a little bit higher than we'd like, and we saw some fluid coming out of the top. So we're gonna reduce the level to somewhere in between the minimum and max. So when he's pumping the pedal 20 times, it's not gonna cause a little bit of overflow at the cap. That should be pretty good right there. So reducing the level was a smart way to go. So he's still pumping the pedal and the fluid is rising. That's 20? You're holding?
Yeah.
What I have here is an offset wrench. Normally these bleeders are 10 millimeter, but he has speed bleeders. This is a 12. So he's holding pressure on the pedal, and I'm gonna crack this. And I have a tube connected to a catch container. And I should be seeing some air come out and a little bit of fluid. Okay, a little bit came out. I close it off. Okay, Con, do it again. Say holding really loud.
Holding.
So you get the procedure. We're gonna keep doing that on this right front one till when I crack open that bleeder, I only see fluid coming out, no air. And then we're gonna move to the left front. During this bleed procedure, you wanna make sure you maintain the level between the minimum and maximum at all times. Periodically, go back and check the level and not let it dip below the minimum level while you're doing the bleed procedure. We bled both front brake calipers, and now we're on the rear. We found the same situation with the rear. It's easier to access the bleeder with the tires off, so we did that. The procedure is a little bit different for the rear. You don't have to pump the brake pedal 20 times and hold it. All that you have to do is have somebody hold firm pressure on the brake pedal, and then you open up the bleeder and fluid continually flows with that brake pedal depressed. It won't sink to the ground, it will hold firm, but by applying pressure with the brake pedal, that activates the brake booster to move fluid. All Con has to do for me is hold that pedal firm, and I open up the bleeder, and then when I see that no air is coming out, I close it off and we're done, and then we can move to the left rear. So we're doing the right rear first. So I've got my laptop with the Toyota Techstream software on it. We connected up our OBD2 cable. This is the end that you connect up underneath your dash on the driver's side. This will allow this laptop to access the computer on the Land Cruiser. So we have to make that connection. We've got the Techstream program open, and the top button says connect the vehicle. So I'm going to click on that. Currently we have the ignition in the on position. and it's showing it's initializing the USB communication. And then now we have to put in the vehicle information. So it already picked up from the computer that it's a Toyota Land Cruiser 1998 with the 2UZ-FE engine, the 4.7 liter V8. So then we'll click on next. And then we want to go to this button right here that says ABS VSC track. And we're going to click on that. And it says, to ensure proper communication, be sure the engine is idling for vehicles that have the VSC. So do you have the VSC system? Okay, so we don't think we have that with this vehicle. And then we get to the next screen and we go to utility. And then once the next screen pops up, it says utility selection menu, we go to air bleeding and we click on that. And then it says down below, use this function after replacing the brake actuator, which we did. We replaced the hydraulic brake booster. So then we go down to this bottom right arrow and we click next. So now it says, welcome to the air bleeding utility. This function is used to purge air from the hydraulic braking system. Note, when bleeding, ensure that the fluid level does not drop below the indicated minimum line on the reservoir. Press next to proceed. So what we do is we bleed the front right caliper, and then when we're done with that, we bleed the front left caliper. You don't use Techstream for the rear brakes, only for the front brakes on this 100 series Land Cruiser. So I'm going to click on the front right and then go to next. It says the bleeding operation on the next screen will automatically stop after 4 seconds. It's actuating a solenoid, and that's a protective mechanism so the solenoid doesn't overheat. So it's only going to allow you to do this operation for 4 seconds, and then there's going to be a resting period, and then you could do it again. And we're basically going to do this process until we get no more air coming out of the front right section. When I click next, what Con is going to have to do is he's going to have to press pressure on the brake pedal for this operation to work. So I click on next, and then it gives you instructions. It says press and hold brake pedal. I open the brake bleeder and then press next. You wait for the timer, and then there's going to be a waiting period. So go ahead, Ton, push on the brake pedal and hold it. Okay, then I have to get to the wheel and I have to open up the brake bleeder, but I'm going to let Ton actually do that. So we're going to coordinate this. I'm going to tell Ton to open up the bleeder. I'm going to click the next button. It's going to operate for 4 seconds, and after it's done, then I'm going to tell him to close the bleeder, and we have to wait 20 seconds for the system to reset. Go ahead and open it, Ton, and tell me if it's open.
Open.
Okay, close the bleeder.
Close.
Release brake pedal. So we're resting for 20 seconds. Okay, open up the bleeder.
Open.
Close it.
Closed. A lot of air came out on that one.
During this process, when we click on the button to operate the solenoid, we could hear it running. Okay, open up the bleeder.
Open.
Okay, close it off.
Closed.
Release brake pedal.
A lot of air came out.
So you guys get the procedure. I wait for the system to reset. I tell them to open the bleeder. I click the next button. It operates for 4 seconds. At the end of the 4 seconds, you close off the bleeder, and the person sitting in the driver's seat lets off the brake pedal. You wait the 20 seconds, and then you do it again. And we're going to keep on doing this until we get no air out of that right front caliper. All right, we did the same bleed procedure on the front left on the driver's side. We kept on doing that procedure till we saw no more air come out of the line, and then we finished the process. We put the wheels back on, we torqued them to the spec that Con likes, which is 97 foot-pounds, and then he's going to take it for a test drive, and hopefully he's going to report that the braking is better. One thing to remember is you want to get the level somewhere in between the minimum and maximum. What Con has said is what he's learned is that if you fill it up all the way to the max line, and then when you start the vehicle, the level can rise a little bit on you. So he's purposely going to leave it a little bit below the max line so it doesn't overflow like it's happened to him before. Con's going to go on a test drive, and hopefully we're going to find out that the braking is better. All right, we are all done with this job. Con came back from his test drive, and he did say there was an improvement. It wasn't as big of an improvement he was hoping for, but he said that he used to actually have to pump the brakes. So if he was applying the brakes, say on a descent, and then if he let off the brake a little bit, and when he goes to push it again, the pedal would travel really far, so he'd have to pump it up to get the brake pedal firmer. So on his test drive, he noticed that if he would apply the brakes and then apply them again, it didn't have that sinking that it used to have. We got a positive result on replacing the hydraulic brake booster on Con's 100 series Land Cruiser. The question is, was it worth the money? He's given 2 thumbs up. He's saying it was worth the expense. So what we've noticed is that the price of these hydraulic brake boosters used to be a lot more. They were in the neighborhood of about $2,500. And we've checked the prices recently, and they've dropped by almost $1,000, of around $1,400 to $1,500. That's online pricing. That's not pricing going right up to the counter at your local dealership. They're going to charge you a lot more if you do that. But if you order it online, these hydraulic brake boosters are in the neck of the woods of $1,400 to $1,500. You saw that we had to use the Techstream program in order to properly bleed the brakes for this hydraulic brake booster replacement. A lot of you aren't going to have the Techstream program. The way I got the program is a while back, several years ago, there was a guy who was refurbishing laptops, and then he would install the Techstream program on there, and he was selling them for a very fair price, somewhere in the area of about $200. So I'm lucky that I was able to get one from that guy. I haven't seen his listings on eBay for a while, so I guess he stopped doing it. If you wanted to follow this video tutorial to replace your hydraulic brake booster, you could, but if you didn't have the Techstream program, then you're gonna have to get the vehicle over to a shop that does have the Techstream program so they can properly bleed the brakes for you. So that's the limiting factor for this job, is you really need that Techstream program to properly bleed the system. If you go on eBay, you will find people selling laptops with the Techstream program, but they usually want somewhere in the neck of the woods of $500 on up. It's a pretty expensive thing to buy these days on eBay. Maybe you'll get lucky, and at the time you search on eBay, you'll find somebody selling a laptop with the program for a much more affordable price. So there it is there. That's the caveat. You need that Techstream program to properly bleed the system when you're doing an operation like this. With all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean, and special guests Ton and Con. Ton and Con. Con and Ton. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, do that below. Take care. Bye-bye. Sick mods and sick hydraulic brake booster replacements on a 100 series Land Cruiser. Peace out. Happy wrenching. Bye-bye.